We're supposed to be Christ-like.
Exactly. That's exactly right. When we live in this world and we claim to be followers, believers in God, and we act in an ungodly manner, how do people perceive you now?
As a hypocrite.
Not only as a hypocrite, I mean, they just have a bad taste in their mouth. You'll turn them off, quote, of religion in general. You know, are there not people that are turned off religion because of what they see in the world?
And they throw it all in one pot.
They put it all together. There have been wars in the name of Christianity, you know, with the Protestants and the Catholics, and they put everything together. You don't understand. Just because you're religious doesn't mean you're right in the sight of God. And the danger is that when you have people out there who are looking on religion in that general sense, I personally understand why they get a bad taste in their mouth. I would too. Obviously because of a lack of understanding. And because of lack of understanding of what the Bible actually teaches, they're just thinking, you know, it's all wrong, everybody's the same, and that's just not the case. We have to be careful, on the other hand. You and I have to be different. And should we really be different? I mean, first of all, are you religious? Are you religious? You better be. Okay, I mean, obviously religious. To be religious means you believe in a higher power. Now, you're religious, and there's a lot of other religious people in this world, correct? How are you different religiously than all the other people out there that are religious? How are you to be different? EJ, how are you to be different?
Because you don't go along with them, you correct them. If they don't want to be corrected, you walk away.
Okay, so we stand against error. Dave?
Well, obeying God's will and not man's will.
Okay, I like it. Mark?
Well, in a global sense, we acknowledge God as the creator. And when he speaks, we listen.
Okay, now your second part is the key. There are lots of religious people that acknowledge God as the creator of this world that are religious, but they're religiously wrong. We take it to the next level, and so you talked about the fact that we listened to what he had to say accurately. Warren?
We strive to follow the doctrine of Christ, his teachings, and calling for the apostles.
Right.
The creation of the church, how it's supposed to be structured.
Okay.
That probably sets us apart in a large degree from what some of the other religions.
There's no question. There's no question. You have religious people out there that follow a lot of what the Bible has to say, but they're inconsistent, as the word that Janet used, being hypocritical. But the point is, I'm trying to bring it down to us. I'm not sitting here saying, you know, let's spend the morning pointing the finger at all those people that are not walking according to the truth. The lesson is for us. That's what he's telling Timothy here. Listen, you need to exhort people to walk a certain way so they don't blaspheme God and his teachings. And I can see where some people, as soon as you open up their Bible, their eyes roll. Oh, great. You can preach Bible to me. Well, the problem there is because they have put you all together with all the other religious people in the world, and we're not. But we have to work very, very hard at showing that there's a difference, because you guys over the years have heard me say this. I've used it in Bible classes. I used it yesterday in a Bible class. I say there are two words that are most widely misunderstood in the religious realm that are used rather loosely. And what are those two words? See if you can guess them. Christian is one, is used loosely. And what's the other one? On a little larger scale.
Saved.
The church.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Those two terms are used so loosely in the religious realm today. Oh, everybody calls himself a Christian. You know, if you go to religious, you know, they'll call themselves a church. Does it take much to establish a church today? No, I'm not talking about the church you read about in the Bible, but how easy is it to start a church today?
Easy.
Guys, all you have to do is fill out some paperwork with the government, and you can be a non-profit organization, and you can call. Go ahead, Trey.
Well, the majority of people, the majority think the church is the actual building.
Yeah, that's true. And for you and I, any one of you could say, you know, I'm going to start in my home or rent an office building or whatever and call it the Newburgh Community Church. Maybe there is one, who knows. You can come up with any name that you wanted. And as far as the government's concerned, it's very easy to establish a church. But, you know, I don't want to spend the morning talking about these two principles, but my point is as Paul was telling Timothy here, we walk differently, and we want to make sure that we live in such a way that God's name is not, you know, his doctrine isn't blasphemed, and he himself is not blasphemed. Now, obviously, before we move on, if you live a godly life, does that mean everybody's going to love God and his teachings? No, we know that. We know there's still going to be people who don't believe. You know, so you can do the right thing and people still do the wrong thing. We know that. So, but there's no excuse for us to not to live the way God wants us to, because we're mindful of others. And that's what he was talking about here. Be mindful of those that are over you. Look at verse 2. And those who have believing masters, okay, let them not despise them because they are brethren, but rather serve them because those are benefited, those who are benefited are believers and beloved. Teach and exhort these things. I know it's a bad parallel, but you could be working for a boss, right? Is he over you? Does he tell you what to do? Absolutely. Could he fire you? Absolutely. So there's a proper attitude that needs to be there. Now, what if your boss is a Christian? And you're a Christian, but he's not treating you like a Christian should. What might you be tempted to do?
Do the same thing.
Stoop to their level, right? See, the whole point here is, folks, is that he's talking about Christians, how you're supposed to live. I don't care what your circumstances are. In this case, he was talking about those who were slaves. And he talked about those, well, what if your master owner is not a Christian, and what if he is a Christian? Now, do you think under those circumstances, if that existed, which one would you opt for? Obviously the believer. You know, if I'm going to go work for somebody, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go work for this shyster, or I'm going to go work for this brother in the Lord. I'm thinking, man, this guy's going to treat me right. You know, he's going to be honest, and you know, obviously that's going to be a better deal, and I need to be mindful of that. But I'm going to tell you something. Either scenario, Christian or not, there's a danger for us, and that was his point. We as Christians need to live godly. Matt.
This one kind of hits home for me because years ago, my first job out of college, I had a customer that I had to go around to regularly that, to be honest, was kind of a jerk. Like, he was rude to me. You know, if things weren't perfect and didn't go his way exactly, you know, it wasn't anything for him to cuss me out. And it was an experience that he had had with, not so much with me, but with the company in the past that I kind of somewhat paid the price for. And so, as a result, I couldn't stand the guy. I didn't like him either, and I didn't treat him very good either. And it was one day, we had a day, I guess you could call it a connection, where we actually weren't mad at each other. And we were talking, and conversation came up. We'll come to find out, we were both members of the church. And different, you know, went to different congregations, but you want to talk about face red.
Yeah.
I was young and dumb, and we were both really embarrassed. And it was, you know, after that, we never had any problems. But the kicker, and I think back on that, it's a learning example for me today that I still think when I come into contact with somebody at work that comes in, is upset about their phone, and they're rude to me, I try to keep that specific scenario in mind. I'm actually thankful that it happened, although it should have never happened. But
you learn from it.
Right, you learn from it. It's a good idea that we have to keep in mind that it should, whether he was a Christian or not,
Right.
it still shouldn't have mattered, or the dynamic of our relationship still should have been positive,
Right.
but all the more so.
You know, I think, and I've used the illustration before, any one of you guys, if you jumped in the car this morning and somebody cut you off, I mean, you had to slam your brakes, and you pulled around and you put your window down and you cussed him out, and then you got here and he pulls in behind you at church. Yikes! Whoa! We talk about red face, right? the guy spilled something and he didn't realize he cut you off. You know, whatever. My point is, and I think this is the key that we need to keep in mind. Talking about those two things, what is really the big picture? What is the big picture we always need to be keeping in mind? You know, why care about whether God and His doctrine is going to be blasphemed? Why care about how you treat somebody else? Why care? What is the big picture?
We're representing Christ.
And why? Why would you care about that?
Make to heaven.
There you go. That's it. You know, your goal is simply you want to go to heaven, and the stuff that's going on down here doesn't really mean a whole lot in the big scheme of things, right? What your job, you can't take money with you wherever you go. Your popularity, you know, the pat on the back that you're wanting, you know, what's that going to matter in heaven as far as that's concerned? The goal is to make it to heaven. You want to be saved. I mean, and it's so easy to lose sight of that with life, isn't it? You know? I mean, you know, we've been joking lately. This is day 21, no sugar. You know, really, big deal. Does that really matter in heaven?
No.
Doesn't matter, right? Oh, I've lost so much weight. Doesn't really matter. You know, family, getting married. You know, got this new job, got this career, got this. I mean, the list goes on in an earthly sense here. And Paul is telling them, look, here's how you're supposed to do. Here's how you're supposed to treat others, is my point. And make sure that you live a godly life. That's what he's talking about here in these two verses. All right? Because society can change. We could be oppressed. Debbie just told me she read something the other day about, you know, in another country, how that it's getting to the point where if you're considered a Christian, the things that are going to happen to you because of that. I'm not going to get too specific on that, but things could happen here that way. But no matter what kind of oppression we would ever face here, in the big scheme of things, does it matter? I mean, no matter what happens to us, still heaven's your goal, right? I mean, no matter what happens. If all of a sudden the government says, okay, now, you know, your income tax, now we're going to take 50%. Every dime you make, we're going to give you 50%. You guys are thinking, well, you already do that. No. But if things get so hard, where you're saying, oh, you know, you're not allowed to own a house anymore. Thank you very much. Where's your deed to your property? It's the government's now. Is it the end of the world for you? Seriously, is it the end of the world? I mean, no matter how bad things get, the big scheme of things, and that's what went on in the first century. You've got heaven as your hope. I mean, you say, well, Chuck, I'm glad I didn't live back here, you know, with what they went on, what they had to go through, or, you know, in this country at a certain time period. But the bottom line is, you can still live a godly life. I don't care what happens to you. You can still live a godly life. We say that to somebody who's in a bad marriage. Well, he just doesn't treat me. You can still be a godly person. Well, she doesn't treat me. You can still be a godly person. My neighbor's so bad. You can still be godly. And we don't need not lose sight of that. Okay, any thoughts before we go to verse 3? Okay, I want 3 through 10 read. Brian, we'll go with you zigzag 2 verses apiece and we'll go back.
If anyone teaches a different doctrine and does not agree with the sound words of our Lord Jesus Christ and the teaching that accords with godliness, he is puffed up with conceit and understands nothing. He has an unhealthy craving for controversy and for quarrels about words, which produce envy, dissension, slander, evil, and suspicions.
And constant friction between men of depraved mind and deprived of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. But godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment.
7 and 8, David.
For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content.
But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which draw men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and preach themselves through many sorrows.
All right. Wow. We're not getting through this section this morning. I'll tell you that right now. This whole section talks about the dangers that we face, and I'm going to tell you, I don't care what area you lived in. You know, if people are going to study this 1,000 years ago, that it's still applicable for us today. We need to be mindful of how we need to live. And by the way, as we go through these studies, who of us are perfect? But the point is, we are striving for it. If somebody points out an imperfection within you, you can say to them, you know, I'm sorry. You know, I apologize. I'm going to try to do better. You want to dig up dirt on somebody, you can dig up dirt on them. But a person who's striving to do the will of God understands that they need to do the best that they can. And for you to point it out, I don't need to get defensive about it. And he talks about that here in verses 3 and 4. Look what we have here. If anyone teaches otherwise, teaches what otherwise? What we've just been talking about. If anybody teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which is according to godliness, what is he then? A person is not going to listen to wholesome words, and you've run into these kinds of people. You've tried to be reasonable. You ever tried to be reasonable with an unreasonable person? You know, you're trying to be godly around ungodly people, and you're trying to reason with them. Here's how he describes them. He's proud. You know, you're not going to tell him what to do. He's proud, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, reviling, and evil suspicions, useless wranglings of men of corrupt minds and destitute of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means to gain. From such withdraw yourselves. I'm going to tell you, what we just read in those verses, I know you've witnessed it. We just need to make sure we're not participants. We need to make sure we don't act that way. But that's what we're up against. You have these people that think, you know, I'm not going to put up with how I'm being treated because what's in it for me? Why should I be nice to that person when they're so ignorant or rude to me? What's in it for me? You know, I'm only going to be nice to somebody if what? Yeah, if there's something in it for me. I'm going to have so-and-so over for dinner. Why? Because they're going to have me over to their place. But if they're not going to have me over to their place, I'm not having them over my place. You know, in other words, I'm only going to do stuff if it's in my best interest, is the mentality of a lot of people today. And Christians are different. We are to be different. And people like to argue, you know, you can just see, you know, this guy hanging around with some of other co-workers or some other slaves. You go, why are you being so nice to him? Why are you doing that? So you got these guys over here, and I'll tell you today, are there people today who will chastise you for being good? Can you give me a scenario? Where would somebody be upset with you for being good? What do you think?
When you catch them doing wrong.
Pardon me?
When you catch them doing wrong.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. Anything else we can say, Fred?
Well, like for instance, if everybody's working the same time at work, and you're being honest on your timesheet, and the boss knows that everybody's working at the same time, so why do I have less time than them? The people that are lying on their timesheet don't like you.
Right.
They don't like you because it shows it.
That's exactly right. Matt?
I think if you try to do something, if you do something good for somebody, people may want to try and accuse you of doing it for dishonest reasons or your own personal gains, as opposed to you want to do something nice for somebody.
That's exactly right, Jen.
Well, is verse, was that 3 and 4, is that talking about like a false teacher? Because it sounds like they're teaching.
Yeah, he's talking about people that are not listening to wholesome words.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is.
And it can be brethren, and he describes that at the end of this
Okay.
chapter, or into this section. And you have brethren that can become like that, and that's the whole warning for us, because obviously we're not immune to some of the things that you guys are talking about here. These examples that are there. And where we might get upset with somebody who's making us look bad. You know, and it can't help but do that, because what does light do to darkness? Doesn't it expose it? You can't help but, when you're being good, making other people who are not good look bad. And so what's the temptation? For
Try
you.
to draw you down.
The temptation for you is to lower your standard. The temptation is like, I'm going to do my best to fit in. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong. We try to live peaceably with all men. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we're compromising our faith, when we're not being the kind of people that God wants us to be, we're stooping to the levels of other people, then what we become a man pleaser. I'm more interested in having people like me rather than have God approve of me. That's the difference. And he describes these types of attitudes, and this is what you and I have to work at because, of course, none of us ever had envy or strife in our hearts. Evil suspicions. He talks about here. Useless wranglings of men of corrupt mind. And I like this because he talks about what causes it is the destitute of the truth. Trey's illustration about cheating on a timesheet, let's say, and everybody's all upset, what's getting lost in all of this? The truth. When it comes right down to it, this is how many... you're doing... Whoa. Truth is just getting lost in all of this. It's like truth doesn't matter anymore. Don't confuse me with the facts. And you run into that a lot, people, when you talk about evolution. Don't confuse me with the facts. Hey, I'll talk facts. People think we believe it. We got a blind faith in the things that we believe and what we teach here. No, it's based on evidence. And I'll go up, I just did that in a class yesterday. I'll go up against anybody who says there is no God and the Bible's not the Word of God. And I'll say, I'll challenge you on that one. And I'll prove it if you give me time. I don't care if people are skeptic and don't believe it. I said, are you willing to discuss these things? But when you close your minds like the people talk about here, when you're not interested in the truth, you're not going to get anywhere with that. And they're going to falsely accuse you of just believing because your parents believe or because it's the right thing to do. Well, no, I'm not going to believe in God because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to believe in God because it is right. It's right. And we can talk about that. So the danger for us, or the lesson for us, is to make sure that we're not like this is the point. That we're always interested in the truth. And that proud attitude, being arrogant, is going to prevent us from achieving the goal that we need. And an arrogant person closes his mind. An arrogant person knows everything already. And you can't tell him he's done anything wrong. 3 through 5. I was just going to ask you if you got any more comments about that. But don't forget what he said in verse 5 at the end. From such withdraw yourself. Why do you think he said that? From such withdraw yourself. Misty.
If you don't, it's going to create dissension within the church and potentially lose souls from it.
Evil companions corrupt good morals. Obviously people say, well, Chuck, you tell me to quit my job? No, I'm not quit your job. Okay. In some situations that we find ourselves where we have that ability, and sometimes you just have to walk away from a situation. That's easier said than done. I understand that. But this whole attitude that godliness is a means of gain, that people have that attitude, you need to make sure you don't, you withdraw yourself from even that, not only that influence, but that mindset. I am just not going to do it. I'm not going to have the attitude is, well, I'll become a Christian, but what's in it for me? You lost the big picture here. Sometimes somebody might become, what are some reasons somebody might become a Christian? What's that, EJ?
Sounds like they want to be a pillar of the community and just for the heck of it. So they can have
Well, you got to be careful because, somebody wants to become a Christian just because they want business connections. I've got a business. And so if I become a part of a church and I expect all those members to come to me for my particular expertise, let's say. Let's say I'm an electrician. Well, why didn't you come to me? I'm an electrician. I told you guys a while back that we had a visitor come to services when I was up in Toronto, and he came out that Sunday morning, And he's going around giving everybody his business card. It's the only reason he came. I was livid. But he wasn't a Christian. I expect, you know, non-Christian do non-Christian things, but it wasn't good. Matt?
That's the thing that always cracks me up about elections. Like, you see every time we elect a new president, it always comes up, well, they're a member of this church. And then everybody starts scrutinizing what the preacher there preaches and what they believe and what they do. And, you know, the church is kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, technically, we haven't seen them in 10, 15 years, but
Right.
yeah, I guess this was technically the last place they placed membership, and they want to, you know, but to run for office, you got to be a member of, you know, a quote-unquote church, and it's...
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of reasons why people would do it. And, you know, again, it's to get that concept of to getting gain. That's the only reason I'm doing it. It's dangerous. He gets into this idea in these last few verses in our reading, not in the chapter, but in our section here. We're going to talk about the dangers of money. Now, if you'll notice, he says in verse 6, now godliness with contentment is great gain. In the book of Acts, it used that phrase, it's better to give than to receive. Why is it better to give than to receive?
You're doing good.
What's that?
You're doing good.
Do you get anything out of giving?
Yes.
You do.
You're storing up for yourself reward in heaven, but, you know, it's giving someone something, you're giving yourself, you're getting a good reputation, you're getting, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like you're getting positive things out of that will translate to the next life. You know, those things, they will tie over. We can take that with us, but receiving physical things, like we're not, as the next verse talks about, you know, we came into this world with nothing, we're going to leave it the same way.
You know, there's got to be a motivation, you know, to give. You know, that you're kind to your neighbors, Mark.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's physiological benefits to it, just the way that we're made. I've never, and I can't think of a single time I've ever walked away after having helped somebody, and I didn't feel good about that.
Right. And that's the key. You know, I think we need to understand that there's a reason why we do it. It isn't so much that I'm getting back materially.
It's a joy.
There is joy. There's genuine, you know, God loves a cheerful giver. You know, why am I cheerful parting with my money? You know? Well, we're cheerful about it because of the good that we're doing. It's pleasing the Lord. It's not mine anyways. He's blessed me with all this. And there's just so much that's a part of that. But you can see where we're headed with this in the reading. You can see why he is saying this right now, that godliness with contentment is great gain, because he says, having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. Let's talk a little bit about that. Is it wrong to have ambition? Is this telling us it's wrong to be rich? Okay. All right. Well, he said here, though, didn't he come right out and say, those who desire to be rich fall into temptation? Mark?
Wasn't the whole point of the place in Babel where God compared the language because they weren't showing some ambition to try to move out and take over this world that God had created for them?
Just wanted to build that tower all the way to heaven. Yeah, you know, when you think about, you know, what was the question I just asked you? Senior moment.
The desire. I think the word desire is the trap. You know, desire to be rich, because when people desire something, it means that they normally are, you know, put other things on the back shelf to get what they really want, and that would be probably like God's word or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to talk about verse 9 without not looking at verse 10. I think that's really the key. We're talking about there's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get a promotion. There's nothing wrong with trying to become wealthy per se, but we need to keep the balance is what we're talking about right now. James.
I was just going to say, with respect to that, it seems more of a caution to me. You know, saying that you could fall into temptation doesn't necessarily mean you will sin.
Right.
But it means that your life is going to be much harder than it needs to be. And I think a lot of these things are there to caution us on how to protect ourselves, on things to avoid, things to watch for, so that we don't make things harder for ourselves than they need to be.
Right, and I want us to think about this because he talked about contentment. You've got food, you've got clothing, you've got a roof over your head. When we talk about being materialistic, being covetous, what's covetous mean? You just want stuff, okay? And that wanting stuff can be the goal. I want money, money, money. I want it, I want it, I want it. How hard is it for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, guys?
Really hard.
Jesus said, what is it? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh, I guess there's no danger there. Yeah. But we also know that rich is used in a relative term, right? Are you guys rich? Are you guys really rich compared to these third world countries?
Yes.
Oh, you guys are loaded. Loaded. We are. Matt and Nancy.
You know, you can really plug anything in here. It mentions rich because that kind of covers everything, but you can plug in, you want to be a pro athlete, want to be retired, want to be a fisherman. You know, the key here isn't being rich, it's what's consuming you. What's your number one priority? You know, if my number one priority is to retire one day, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that becomes my number one goal, driving force to the point that my spiritual life and everything takes a back burner to that, it's no different. I could be poor as all get out. It's no different than somebody that's striving to be rich. That's, you know, what's driving.
Yeah. Do only rich people have a problem with money?
No.
No. Who buys most lottery tickets?
Poor.
Poor people do. Nancy?
Well, the people replace the desire to have all of this stuff over God.
Yeah, and that's the point. You get your priorities wrong. When you are obsessed, it's when the love of money. And I've been around those guys. I've been around guys, the conversation, within 2 minutes, it's back to money. Everything's money, money, money. I mean, seriously, they're obsessed with it. It's their ultimate goal in life. And the danger, you guys have all been talking about it here, and that's what he's mentioning here. Those who desire to be rich, this particular desire isn't, you might fall. Now, there's a danger. Can rich people go to heaven? Were there rich people in the Bible that were faithful to God? There absolutely. Abraham was a rich man. Okay, and so there's nothing wrong, you know, and rich people can, but the point is you got to trust in God is the goal. He says here, those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men into destruction and perdition. Why? Because they have tunnel vision. They can't see where this is headed. They can't see the danger there. People that desire to be rich, what has been destroyed in their lives? Families, right? Well, I'm providing for you. You know, some people are the loneliest people living in their mansions. They're the loneliest people. Gene.
Yeah, we talk and preach a lot about blessings we have in Christ.
Yeah.
We have a blessing of health, this or that. If we're selfish, we're not going to use that opportunity with our good health to help someone else. It's just as bad.
Yeah.
It's not the love of money, it's money becomes your number one priority.
Yeah, that's it. You become obsessed with it. Is the material blessings that we have caused us to become selfish? The more success we have, the more we just focus on what we have. Mark?
Isn't it ironic that Solomon, who the Bible teaches is the wisest man to ever live, he speaks to us thousands of years later and it's still the most ignored message that's ever been put out to mankind. He said it was all vanity and striving for the wind.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing. Can we really learn from others? I mean, we're talking about somebody who had it all. Of course, you and I are thinking, well, let me at least try. Let me have it all. Let's see how I do with it. You know, okay, so Solomon had everything you could possibly, I mean anything that existed in that time. If he existed today, he'd have every gadget you could imagine. But he had everything, and it led to his demise. And he realized it's all vanity. Because why? He lost focus of the big picture, which he said, in the end, fear God and keep his commandments.
Well, it's, you know, a lot of these people, look at ourselves, for instance. Like, we all make more money now than we did when we were 20, 21 years old. But, you know, we also find different ways to spend it. It's not like we're hoarding cash somewhere and that type of thing. And you look at rich people today, the billionaires and the millionaires out there, very rarely do they just say, okay, I'm good. I mean, if you gave me $1 billion, we all here could live the rest of our lives very happy and comfortable off of it, never work again. But they're always like, that's not enough for them. Like, they want to get, they need more. Like, how many yachts do you need? How many houses and private islands? And you can tell these people that there's always, that's their drug.
Because there's no contentment. They're not content. You know,
how much is enough?
Yeah, you're never satisfied. And I think we as God's people, we're happy with what we got. And if, you know, we get that bonus, we have an opportunity for a promotion, okay, I'll take it. But then what's interesting is for those of us who are not letting it get the best of us, when somebody offers us a promotion, we say, is that really in my best interest? That means taking my kids out of high school with their friends. There's no church where this new place I'm going to live at. And they, in the end they say, no, it's not worth it. Oh, I'll make twice the money. But it's just not worth it. And that's what you have to say to yourself. We weigh things, but sometimes the getting rich quick or whatever causes us to lose sight of heaven, lose sight of our goals, our priorities, and what the Lord expects out of us on a day-to-day basis. That's the danger. And that's why he mentioned here that they will drown in destruction. Who drowns in destruction? Do they want to drown in destruction? No, they just don't see it. It's like people you're sick and they don't know it. The people who are obsessed with money and are making a lot of money, do they see a problem in their life? Life is good. So I want you to see there's a danger of doing all of this and thinking everything's fine when it's not. Because the obsession causes you to lose sight of what's really in front of you. What's there. And that's why he ended it. He says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So I don't know how I ended up with it. Well, what do you mean you don't know how? It was your greediness. You got so greedy and you ended up in this situation. It's like gambling. You got so greedy and you lost everything. And the sorrows that were there, because that's what you became obsessed with. And you and I need to be mindful of the dangers that are there, as God is telling us here. Because we live in a society that promotes it, right? Who's a success in the world today? Who's a success? Say, there's a successful person. Yeah, do you think a person is successful who just has, who's getting by? He's got a nice family, pays the bills, got a roof over their head. And, anyways, we'll pick up there. Our time is gone, and we got 15 minutes to get ready for worship. Thank you for your comments, guys. I appreciate it. Gary and Pam.
I looked at it, right before she started doing work this, and he leaned backwards. Last week?
It's not. But now the road. Yeah, that's Gary and Pam.